Hey, everybody, this is Tom Sega from Duluth Pack, and this is the Duluth Pack podcast, Leader of the Pack. And today we have a very special guest, Grant Hauschild. Grant is the Executive Director of Essentia Health Foundation, East Market. Grant, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And we're going to have some fun. We're going to learn all about you, Grant, and how in the heck do you get to a position like you have, being a big shot at the hospital?
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm excited to tell you about what we do. And Essentia is a great place to work. So, looking forward to getting into it. Thanks so much.
Oh, no problem. And let's jump right in here. First and foremost, tell us all about Grant. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, well, I am one of those people in the Duluth area that did not grow up here. And so I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. I would consider it very much a sister city to Duluth, very comparable, but also a lot of differences. Fargo is a farm, prairie, flat land. It has no big lake. It has no big hiking trails, things like that. And it's also a pretty rapidly growing city. So from growing up there to what it is now when I visit, it's just kind of a totally different place. But I loved growing up there. I love Fargo. And I think, there's great things that Duluth does and there's great things that Fargo does. And I think there's a lot we could learn from one another. So.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So you graduated from high school in Fargo.
Yep.
Where did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to the University of North Dakota. So for a lot of your listeners, I'm sure they're Duluthians or follow Duluth and they're Bulldog fans. So I'm a pretty big Fighting Hawk fan, or formerly a Fighting Sioux fan. So
we're okay with you saying that because we still support that.
Yeah. I always tell people around here, I'm like, the Bulldogs are my second favorite team. If the Hawks aren't on, then I'm a Bulldog fan. So.
Yeah, you're rooting for whoever the Bulldogs. You're rooting for the Bulldogs unless they're playing against North Dakota.
Exactly. And I was even there in 2011 when they won the national championship. I think that was their first one, or one of their first ones. And I, the Sioux had lost at that point, and I decided to still go to the game because I was just excited to see the Bulldogs do well. So,
yeah, it's I'll tell you what, it's been some great rivalries over the year. And so what did you major in when you were at the University of North Dakota?
I majored in political science and public administration. Both of those are, one of them is really the political theory side of things, and the other one is the application of politics. I think those in tandem are extremely important. I think we can learn a lot about the application of ideas, about the application of policy. So I'm just really grateful that I did them both. While I was in that program, I did, eventually go on to grad school at George Washington University, where I also studied a master's in public policy. So kind of furthering that education. And man, that background in public administration is so helpful when you're talking about, kind of those theories around policy.
Right. And so what was your original plan with those majors and that master's degree?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I had a clear plan. It's not like I had a designated position I was looking to do. Maybe I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here, but I had theory growing up in the Midwest. There's this idea of Minnesota nice. People go out of their way to help their friends, their families, their neighbors. And it was always my thought that we don't go out of our way to help people to make ourselves feel better. We do that because we know that life is that much easier when we have each other's back. And so when I was studying politics, when I was studying policy, I just wanted to set myself up to work either in nonprofit or government or even business to try to do better for the common good, to try to do better for our communities, because I think the Midwest has something special going on. And we need to talk about it more. So, again, no position or goal really in mind other than where can I make the biggest impact? That was really that was really the fundamental goal.
Our sales manager, you mentioned Minnesota Nice. Our sales manager always says, I don't know if it's Minnesota Nice. It might be called Minnesota Passive Aggressive, because we are very nice people until you tick us off, and then holy cow, we unleash on you. But we all get together and unleash on you. So he has a good saying there, because we do hear that as we travel, and I'm sure as you travel, you hear, you people up there are really nice people.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's always the flip side to everything, and I think there is something to that, no doubt about it. But man, having lived elsewhere in the country, I will tell you it's real. I mean, you can feel it just living here once you step away for a little bit.
Yeah, the old feeling that somebody will give you the shirt off their back if you need it.
Absolutely.
So how did you get into working in the hospital environment, the medical community?
Yeah, I don't think I would have ever guessed that I would work for a hospital. Really what happened, and it's pretty simple. My wife is an advanced practitioner. She was going to school back at our alma mater at UND, and doing clinicals at various hospitals. And she wanted to work at Essentia. She thought it was the best experience she had, and she really liked the Duluth community. And I followed her. And I mean, when I was moving to a new community, I needed to look at my skills, look at my experience, and try to find a new job. And I applied, online through a normal application process, kind of, applying through LinkedIn or one of those Indeed applications, kind of a millennial thing to do, I guess, but it worked out. And I think the lesson there is to not try to pigeonhole yourself, too much. Try to gain, especially when you're younger, try to gain as much broad experience as you can, or at least have themes to your experience, so that when life changes, when your partner moves somewhere else, or when you have to go pursue other opportunities, you have that flexibility to apply what you have to offer.
So you're now the executive director of Essentia Health Foundation's East Market. Woo, that's a mouthful for me here. So what does your role entail in that position?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people at Essentia that do amazing things, but I would say I have one of the lucky jobs, which is I get to tell the story of what Essentia does, to the community, to donors. I get to work with grateful patients who had a wonderful experience, or whose family had an experience at the hospital, and I get to go out and tell that story, and also showcase to communities and to the community and donors how they can make an impact and make healthcare better for others who maybe need it. So, I call myself really a storyteller. I have other duties. I manage staff. I work within the hospital structure to work with our partners on different priorities and funding mechanisms, and distribute our funds. But at the end of the day, I tell our story, and that's a pretty special thing.
Can you tell us some of that story?
Yeah. Well, so I think the most exciting thing that we've been able to do, and this is something that community members have worked on for a long time in Duluth, and that's to bring a Ronald McDonald House to the Northland. For your listeners that maybe don't know, a Ronald McDonald House is a pediatric sort of respite space for families that have a child who's sick. So you can imagine if your child or loved one gets sick, everything else goes out the window. You're not thinking about your job. You're not thinking about your bill. You're not thinking about, all the other things and stressors in your life. You are squarely focused on making sure that your child is cared for. And what the Ronald McDonald House does is it provides a space for you to stay, respite away from the hospital environment and the blinking lights and the rushing staff and all of that. And then it's also free meals. All of the stay and the food and everything that's provided is completely free. So you don't have to think about it at all, and you get to stay as long as your child is receiving care. So there's no worries on any of that end. But I will say just one last thing about that Ronald McDonald House. Although all of that's provided is special, I think the most important part is that it's a home away from home. It's a space where you're with other families who are going through the same experience, and being able to talk to those families, if you want, about what they're going through. There's something about the camaraderie that happens in a Ronald McDonald House and in those respite houses where you just feel supported. You feel like you have what you need. And I just think that story and what we keep hearing from patients is pretty amazing.
So how do you get funds? So these are, people that they definitely didn't choose to be staying at a Ronald McDonald House. It was their worst fears with their children came true, and now they're trying to live and get through this by themselves and also together with other families. How do you get the funds to fund this? Because obviously it takes a lot of resource to not only build, but also house these poor families that are going through some awful things, and make sure they're fed, make sure that they're comfortable, make sure they're safe, all those things. How do you get funding for that?
Oh, it comes from all over. And that's, I think, what's a really cool thing about telling that story too, is there was this build up in the Duluth community to have a Ronald McDonald House for a long time. So when we finally said, we think we're at a place where we can make this happen, so many donors, stood up and were ready to commit pledges over multiple years. We had businesses, banks, vendors of Essentia who have done business with us for a long time being willing to commit some major dollars to make it happen. Then there's also commitments from Essentia itself. We make sure that our operation dollars go into many of these projects as well to make sure we have buy-in. So individual donors giving $50 to businesses giving larger gifts and operation support from Essentia, all of it was critical.
Does the funding for your department at budget time, you need to budget for X amount of donors giving in so that you can fund all of these great things that you're doing from your department? How did that change in the last 2 years for you? Budgeting had to be a nightmare.
It is. I would say one of the biggest challenges I have faced, and this is not to say that everyone else has faced the same challenge, so we're all kind of in this together, but COVID really forced us to pivot away from some of our mid to longer term priorities as a foundation and squarely shift our focus to supporting our frontline healthcare workers, supporting our patients, and everyone else. So we stopped what we were doing with regards to some of our initiatives and opened a COVID-19 response fund. And I know Duluth Pack was one of the first businesses that stepped up to support that. So we're thankful for that. But it went a long way to opening some wellness spaces for our employees to seek respite. We were able to buy a ventilator for patients. So one of those are pretty expensive. We were able to purchase one of those with a gift from a business. And then just care packages, food, all the things that kind of go into making that stressful environment that everyone was going through a little bit easier. So that's really been our focus for the last year and a half.
So you set a budget for 2020, you get about the first quarter into it that year, and it's like, well, this budget has to be thrown out the window because we need to change, but we don't even know what the change is at this point. Yes. Did you have an opportunity to rebudget, or did you have to just rebudget on the fly?
Well, yeah. So to go into the weeds a little bit, I think Essentia had to rebudget. So it wasn't just our foundation; it's every hospital across the country was all of a sudden canceling procedures, making sure that they had more space for COVID patients. So we really were given the leverage, I would say, from our hospital to fundraise for COVID. We worked with an internal grants team at Essentia at the hospital to apply for grants to help us with our bottom line, frankly, at our hospital, to make sure we didn't go too far into the red. So we kind of took a step back and we said, what can the foundation do for the hospital? Do we have unrestricted dollars that we can help with budget gaps? Can we raise money for this COVID-19 fund? Can we leverage our expertise on some of these grant applications with the federal government, with the state government, and with nonprofits? I mean, it was all hands on deck, frankly, and we did our best to manage it.
So you haven't gotten a lot of sleep in the last 18 months.
That's for sure.
Plus a young family within the middle of COVID, if we can say that. You had a baby in the middle of COVID. Holy cow.
I did. My wife and I had our first child, our son Henry, right at the beginning of COVID. I mean, wow. We didn't even know really what was going on at that point. So just the stress that my wife and I went through, and she's an advanced practitioner at the hospital, so she's well aware of, healthcare and the concerns there. But the unknown that we were in was a scary time. So I've been through it myself. And it just makes the work all that much more real, I think, when you've kind of seen firsthand the need.
Right, exactly. Well, both you and your wife seeing it firsthand every single day. So what moving forward? So let's, we're starting to see that we can hopefully move on from COVID, Grant, and all of our lives are going to change again, some way, shape, or form, but we don't know what that's going to quite be yet. It's not business as normal. What challenges do you see moving out of COVID and getting back to whatever normalcy will be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think first and foremost, it's figuring out what is the new reality. And I mean that on kind of multiple fronts. First and foremost, which donors are comfortable having an in-person meeting. I think there are still, rightfully so, many individuals that would prefer not to meet in person or maybe not go to a gathering. Our hospital obviously wants to be careful with that type of thing as well. So that's kind of the first step. The second is all of events were canceled as a foundation, which was a major revenue source. So when can we start those again? Hopefully next year. That will be a big undertaking to kind of reset and redo those events since we've canceled the last 2 years. That'll be a big next step. And then thirdly, there's a lot of projects on the horizon. And I can talk a little bit more about that. We have a lot of projects coming up across our system, our health system, where the foundation is going to be asked to be involved. So it's kind of that constant question of what is our capacity to impact ratio? What can we actually do versus what we're being asked to do by our hospital system? And it's always a conversation piece with leadership. It's where are we most effective in helping you with your priorities? And post-COVID, that'll be, I think, a big discussion point.
Can you go into a few of those for us? You said some initiatives coming forward.
Yeah. So, many people know about the Vision Northland project in Duluth. So right now, we are working on a Vision Northland hospital project on the shores of Lake Superior in downtown Duluth, directly adjacent to our old hospital. It's a $900 million project. It's the biggest in Duluth history. We've received some state support for some of the infrastructure around the building, but otherwise it's our hospital and really our foundation stepping up to support that project. I foresee that campaign going for another couple of years. But then we've got, hopefully a new cancer center in Superior someday that we would like to work on. And then we've got some regional projects, maybe new clinics or new hospitals kind of surrounding the Northland. I won't go into too much detail. Some of that is still in the planning stages, but there's going to be a lot of capital projects, I think, that we'll be involved in. So
just so people understand, we're up in Duluth, Minnesota, and we have listeners from all over the United States, all over the world. This is a huge, huge project that Grant's talking about. They're building a new hospital. A $900 million new hospital here right in Duluth, Minnesota. And it's a pretty big deal for our community. It's a pretty big deal, step forward for the whole region, because we are a medical hub up here for the whole region of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, northwestern Wisconsin, northern half of Minnesota, and in the outreach areas. So we're a big hub here, and this is a massive undertaking that we started hearing about 20 years ago, I would guess, and it's happening, and it's a beautiful building. And the other thing you mentioned is a cancer center in Superior. Superior, Wisconsin is literally 2-3 miles from where we're all sitting. It's a different state because we're on the border, and Essentia is also in Wisconsin. And so when Grant's talking about Superior, he's talking about good Superior, Wisconsin, and building a cancer center right across the St. Louis River from us.
Yeah, that's good context. It's I think for a lot of people that aren't from here, it's hard to kind of gauge where exactly, how close those are. They are actually quite close. So
absolutely. So Grant, what advice would you give to listeners who want to be in a leadership role such as yours? Your journey to get to where you are is your journey. But if somebody was to plan that out, because you say you started with, you didn't really plan this, but if somebody was to plan and they go, what he does sounds really interesting, I'd like to end up in a role like that someday. What kind of journey could you give, or advice could you give for people to go on to get to where you are?
The first thing that comes to my mind is you have to push to become a leader. You can't wait for it to happen or sit back and think you can get the credentials and that somebody will just come to you and hand you an offer or hand you an opportunity. I found that the best leaders are the ones that seek out the opportunity and maybe even make the opportunity for themselves. And by that, I mean, meet with other leaders, meet with businesses, meet with nonprofit leaders, and ask questions. Be curious, be interested in the impact they're looking to make. And if you can find ways to show how your expertise or your background or your education might help them do that better, tell them. Tell them what you bring to the table. They may not have a job, lined up or a job description ready to go, but I'll tell you what, the people that are proactive and talk about impact and talk about ways they can help people, the jobs get made for those types of people. And so that would be maybe the biggest thing I could tell a young person to do.
What would be your recommendation? Because you're talking now about a little bit of maybe getting into the networking, if I'm hearing you. What would you tell some young professionals? Because that's one of the things we like to do is on this podcast is I'm old. I'm at the end of my career. You're young. You're at I would still say the first third of your career, but you've made it to some pretty good levels. For people that are getting in, we like to help them. And in fact, I was on a podcast at one of the local universities today, and it was all about, can you give some advice on hey, mistakes you made? And I could have gone on for days on mistakes there, but what could you give some recommendations on young professionals on networking and how to network and why to network?
Well, this is kind of similar to what I said earlier, but I have some other points too. First and foremost, reach out to people and ask them for the meeting. I think it's amazing to me how many people I know who are unwilling to reach out to leaders or CEOs or bosses of companies. They're normal people. Yes, they're busy. Yes, they're doing incredible things. But I think reaching out first and foremost is an important step. The second, and this is much more critical, once you're networking, you can't always ask others for things. You can't always ask what they can do for you. Your first thing you should be doing is, what can I do for my network? I think whether that's connecting them with a colleague that has a similar interest, referring them for a job that you saw online that seems to match with their interests, giving them an opportunity to talk to your group or your classroom or whatever it might be, making sure that your network feels like you're bringing something to the table and like you're an asset is going to get you much further than if you're just blanket meeting with people asking for opportunity. People want somebody they can partner with, not somebody they can provide for. So I think that would be how I'd go about networking.
So Grant, you're giving some really good advice here to people, and it's not just young people; it's people that are in their careers and maybe looking for a new challenge, or they want to improve themselves. What is the best professional advice that you received from somebody in your career that you said, that one stuck with me, and that's one I can really live by?
I would say, well, I'll tell a story. So, and it kind of goes back to my Midwest statement in the beginning. When I was done with my undergrad, I moved to DC on an internship. And I was in DC, big city, expensive housing. I had an internship, but it was ending. I needed to find a job. I just wasn't really having luck. And I met with a mentor of mine who happened to live in DC. And he sat me down and he said, Grant, you're not in the Midwest anymore. People don't just go out of their way to help you. You need to get out there and push for these opportunities. You need to pursue these and continue to follow up and almost get to the point of being pressy, like being kind of aggressive with seeking opportunity. And that just wasn't how I operated, and it was really a big wake-up call for me, because I think if you're sitting back and not taking opportunity, you're probably missing some boats going by. And so that's probably the best advice I got. At least it was a big wake-up call for me in a big way.
One of those aha moments that, hey, this Minnesota nice thing, you can't wait for it to come to you, but maybe you need to be a little more assertive here.
You're not in Kansas anymore, only you're not in Minnesota anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really good advice for people, because I think people work hard and then they maybe expect things where you learned a good lesson from a mentor that said, hey, don't sit back and wait for it. Go get it. Ask for it. And it doesn't mean we have to be aggressive or abrasive about it, but assertive is maybe a positive thing here to get to where you would like to be. Right. Let me ask you a question, Grant. As you've moved up, and you moved up rapidly in your career, and I ask a lot of people this because I found this in my own career, is as you move up to that next level, and you certainly felt like you were ready for that position, and then you get your new position and you go, holy cow, what have I asked for, because I just got it. Give us some advice, give us some experiences and some stories you have as you've moved up and maybe had those experiences.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's you wish for opportunities. You're exactly right, and then you into them and you're like, am I ready for this? Am I the decider now? It's such a real feeling, and there is some imposter syndrome there. That feeling of am I just making this up as I go, or am I really ready for this? So yeah, it's an interesting feeling. I would say one experience I've had is working in a big organization, trying to recruit staff, people to help you with your mission and goals, and having a very set job description that is worked on by the human resource department and has all this buy-in from all these leaders. And you get to the interview process and you find a candidate that there's just something there. There's you realize that they are the one that you think you could make the most impact with, but they don't maybe fit the job description, or they don't fit what everybody else had kind of thought. It's that moment, I've experienced that where I could have just gone along. I could have just said, you know what, nope, we're going to go with the person that was qualified and just do this. But I stuck my neck out there and I said, I think we should go with this less experienced individual because I see a better fit here. I see an opportunity to grow this person long term with our organization. And I think I got a little bit of exasperation from a lot of folks who had worked hard at that process. But at the end of the day, it worked wonders because that person was the right fit. They were motivated, they were ready to learn, they were curious, and they just wanted to make an impact. So I think the lesson there is when you're a leader, sometimes you can't just go with the flow. You have to be ready to pivot when you see the right opportunity ahead of you and be willing to take some flack from your fellow leaders. Be willing to kind of say, look, guys, I thought this is the direction we were going. It's not, and I take ownership of that, and I'm ready to take the lead on this new direction we're taking. And I think you always have to be flexible as a leader in that way.
It sounds like you're willing to not only take ownership in it, but say, hey, I'm willing to hold myself accountable to this decision.
Exactly. And you have to.
And I think that's I agree with you 100% because I think so many people don't want to they want a position, but they may not want to be held accountable to it. And it's like, you can't have it both ways.
Yep. Exactly.
So Grant, let's pivot back a little bit because I know it's going to be really intriguing because you talked about this huge, I wouldn't even call it expansion because it's not an expansion. You're building a brand new hospital. What's the timeline for this new hospital? Because we're going to have a lot of listeners around here that may not know what the timeline is for the hospital to open and be 100% completed.
Yeah. Well, this is a timely question because just this week we hit the halfway mark on the project, and an exciting stat that I recently saw: 100 million work hours have gone into. 1 million work hours have gone into this project. And there's another 1 million hours that need to go into it to complete it. Wow. So our hope, and it's on time. Everything is going well, and we are expecting it to be done the first quarter of 2023. So we are really trucking along. If you're in Duluth, you can already see pretty much the entire structure really on the outside being fairly complete. Now they'll kind of start to move inside, which will be also really exciting to showcase.
I was thinking that while you were talking, because those people who don't know Duluth, Minnesota, that we've had frost on the ground already. In the next few weeks, snow is going to come and it's going to stay for the next 5, 6, 7 months. And to see the construction workers be able to work inside this winter, I'm sure they're a lot more happy as well.
Yeah, I'll say another fun anecdote about the completion of the project. I'm told from our logistics team that there will be a single day of transferring patients. We'll have breakfast in the old hospital, and they will literally transfer to the new hospital in one day. There'll be a whole team, a whole logistical process that will transition all these patients. It's going to be. I can't wait to see in some, even on the side, just to watch it happen, because I think it'll be a pretty incredible process, and watch it happen will be pretty cool.
I don't want to be the person held accountable to making the logistics happen that day. I would be that guy on the sidelines watching that happen. Somebody's going to have to be pretty talented because that is what an undertaking. So let me ask a question, because you're halfway through the project. If all you have to do is look at social media, turn on the radio, and all you hear about is supply chain issue. How are you all handling the supply chain issue? If you can share some of that with us, because it's got to be affecting you too on a huge undertaking like this that we're halfway through. And are we going to hit our deadlines with equipment, with heck for wind? I mean, the windows are in now. I can see those when I drive by, but so much more to go.
It's an interesting question, and I don't want to speak, out of turn. I'm certainly not a project manager or involved directly in that process. But from what I've been told by our Vision Northland team, We were probably pretty lucky in our timing. The steel order that we made, the construction manager that we brought in, over 3 years ago now, all of the things that have been put in place for this project, I think kind of made it under the wire for this supply chain issue and COVID, frankly. So I have not heard, and again, I'm not directly involved, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but from everything that I've heard, construction's on time. We have what we need. I mean, it's kind of amazing what we've been able to do.
Oh, that's awesome. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about that. And as I've driven around and seen the project happening here in town, I've been, holy cow, I wonder how bad, this is getting hit from these types of things. So from an improvement standpoint, you're going from an old building, obviously equipment is updated and technology and all that all the time. But now we're going to have a brand new facility. What are the biggest improvements that we can look forward to with a brand new hospital versus the old facility?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're exactly right. The whole goal of this new hospital is that we want to bring 21st century medicine to the Northland, and that's through facilities, through upgraded medical equipment, new technologies, but also little things like efficiencies in the way we transport patients. When you're going through a traumatic experience, when someone's in an emergency situation, minutes, seconds, all of those things matter. And for those that aren't familiar with the current Duluth Essentia campus, we have multiple buildings and they're connected by skywalk. So imagine you're a patient in one of those buildings, maybe you're an inpatient. And again, I'm not a medical expert, but I see this firsthand from my experience at the foundation. Patients getting wheeled in the skywalk from one building to another for a different procedure at a different location. That type of thing will go away. I mean, we'll be in one building, we'll be able to have those efficiencies to make sure patients get where they need to. That will be kind of the key thing. One story that I heard about is something called it's basically a camera system that they're going to have in all of the patient rooms where, let's say a physician is out of town and he's a specialist in a certain surgical procedure. The other physicians and medical team will be able to video conference that doctor in directly into that case and get their advice on what's going on with a case from out of the country, for instance. Picture a spouse who's in the military overseas, whose wife goes into labor early. That spouse will be able to experience the birth of their child using this integrated system at our new hospital. My wife is in anesthesia, so she has to provide anesthesia for trauma situations. The anesthesia team will be able to video conference into a completely different floor in the hospital, hear about what's happening in that trauma case, and determine minutes more in advance what type of anesthesia, what they're going to need for this emergent case, rather than walking down to the trauma floor, seeing firsthand, and calling it back up. So these little technological improvements are just going to make a huge difference. Wow. Lastly, one other really exciting piece is that the new hospital will have individual patient rooms. Huge deal for patient privacy, huge deal for quality of care. We're talking views of Lake Superior right outside your window. There will be 2 patient rooms that are not single occupancy, and guess what those are? They're twin NICU patient rooms for when mothers have twins and need to have twins in the NICU. So we're really bringing quality care, I think, to our region, and we're really excited about it.
That is really cool. And, it's interesting because one of my questions is who's benefiting the most from what the foundation's doing, but pretty much I just heard it. It's number 1, the patients, number 2, the families, which you're there for. So if I'm hearing you correctly, I think I probably got those 2 answers correctly today.
Yeah, I don't think, our foundation does so much. We've provided money for opioid research. We've provided money for population health initiatives in our community. We've provided money for heart research and medical student internships. We've provided money for compassionate care dollars, where a patient who can't afford gas or somewhere to stay while receiving care has that opportunity. We've supported rejuvenation wellness rooms for all of our employees at various hospitals and clinics across our system. Our impact is so broad. No one group is benefiting more than others, for sure.
Something different every day, it sure sounds like.
That's right.
So, Grant, if listeners can help with your initiatives, how can they sign up to give to your foundation?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. First and foremost, you can visit our website at essentiahealth.org/foundation. That will bring you to a page where you'll see all of our different affiliated foundations in their local area. All of our funds stay local. So if you donate to Brainerd, Minnesota, our hospital there, the funds will stay local. If you donate to Duluth, the funds will stay local. You can also designate your gift to a particular area. So if you really care about cancer research, you can donate to that. But if you care about the Ronald McDonald House, you can donate to that. So we have all the opportunities to give to different areas and make an impact where you want to. I will say, I would certainly welcome the opportunity to meet with anyone looking to make a difference at our hospital and in healthcare in our region. And I can be reached at my email at grant.hauschild@essentiahealth.org. I love talking to people that want to make a difference, and I can certainly help them find tax advantage ways to give, other ways to give, and to make an impact.
Oh, I think some people's ears maybe perked up when you said some tax advantages in giving to some nonprofits. Give us that email address again, your email address, and make sure you spell it so they spell your last name correctly. And then also give us that website.
Yep. So the website is essentiahealth.org/foundation. And my email is grant.hauschild, spelled HAUSCHILD, @essentiahealth.org.
Perfect. Now we're going to, Grant, you know what? We're going to lighten this thing up a little bit. We are going to move into a section here called our packed questions segment. So we're going to put you a little bit on the spot here. All right?
I like it.
What was your dream job as a child?
Yeah, I studied political science, like I said, and had an interest in that area. I lived in DC, as I mentioned earlier. As a kid, I wanted to be mayor. It's a weird thing, but I just thought that job, the ability to connect with everybody in the community, whether it's businesses, nonprofits, community leaders, to work on initiatives, to work on big projects for the community. It just seemed, I was enthralled by it, and I serve on city council, and where I live now, I love that stuff. I love civic engagement.
What is your biggest fear?
I am an extrovert. I work in a foundation where I have to, be around a lot of people and work with a lot of individuals. I think my biggest fear is being alone, is being isolated, not feeling like I have a connection to others. It's just not something.
Hope it's been a challenge for you then.
Yeah. Oh, COVID has been very difficult on me personally. That's for sure. And with regards to that, yeah.
So Grant, what's your favorite thing to do in your free time?
I'm an avid runner. I am an extrovert and I love being around people, but the one thing that I do to shut off everything around me, to have my own time, is long runs. Particularly in Duluth, we have tremendous parks, hiking trails, waterfalls throughout our community. I love the opportunity to just run and experience nature and just get out of my own head and just kind of zone out. I really truly zone out when I do it, and it really is a great experience for me. The other thing I'll say, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, I just love the work that I do in public service and in city government. I enjoy bureaucratic utility commission meetings. I enjoy city council meetings, hearing from constituents. That stuff enthralls me and it interests me. And some people see it as really boring, but man, I love it.
We need more people like you that want to get engaged in those things. And have you run the marathon? Have you done Grandma's, either the marathon or have you done the half marathon?
Yeah, I've done the half. Yep. It's just, I mean, even having not grown up here, you hear about Grandma's. Like everybody knows what that is. It's such a well-regarded, well-known marathon. It's a special thing our community has, that's for sure.
Good. That's great for you. And you know what? You can do 10K for me too.
Yeah.
I don't think a marathon is in my future. So folks, today our special guest has been Grant Hauschild, the executive director of Essentia Health Foundation East Market. I think we learned a ton of stuff today, Grant. We thank you so much for being here on what goes into your job, how you get into a foundation like that, what it takes to work with that, especially in the middle of a huge project where you are rebuilding a complete hospital. Not you personally, but you're involved and part of. Great to hear the Ronald McDonald House and what that does for families that are put in a position young families would never want to be in. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And look forward to talking to you soon as we get the next 1 million man hours on the hospital here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that project being done and to be able to showcase it to our community that, our foundation will be involved in that effort too. So look forward to giving you a tour at some point.
Perfect. We thank you so much. And folks, like Grant does when he goes out running and unplugs from everything, until next time, unplug from the indoors and recharge in the outdoors. Outdoors.